We're pleased to have with us today President Alan Fisher, who is a local leader in the greater Sacramento area with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, John.
Will you start out by telling us a bit where you were born and raised and grown up, and parents, siblings, family things?
You bet. Born and raised right here in Sacramento, one of the few remaining native Sacramentans as we tend to move around a little bit. So yeah, I was born and raised right here. My family is here. My folks still live in the home that I was raised in. So
very good. And married and children?
I am. I'm married. I have 4 children, 8 grandchildren now. I like to say that I used to be number 1 on my wife's list. I jumped right to number 9 real fast. So yeah, we enjoy them.
The grandchildren are wonderful. How about hobbies?
Well, you know, John, most of my waking hours are spent with work and my church involvement, which I love very, very much. One of the things that I discovered about 3 or 4 years ago was exercise and hiking and some of that in the outdoors. I wish I'd discovered exercise about 30 or 40 years ago, but I'm glad that I did now. And that's a great way to kind of have some diversion and have some enjoyment outside of the grind of daily life. So
you mentioned work.
Yes.
What do you do, employment?
I work for East Lawn, Memorial Parks and Mortuaries. I've been with them for about 20 years now, and a wonderful, wonderful local company that I enjoy serving with those that I work with.
Now, not all of us like to work with the dead. Has that been easy?
In some ways, it's been difficult. In some ways, it's gratifying. I commend my coworkers, particularly the funeral directors, that have to wait on families and serve families every day on the worst day of their lives. And often the deaths will come as a natural course of events later in life, but sometimes they're sudden, sometimes there are children involved, and it's a difficult thing. But I really, really commend them for what they do day in and day out to help this process.
Would you say most of the families see death and dying as a religious or spiritual experience?
Many do. I think sometimes when those types of things occur in our lives, we gravitate back to sometimes the faith of our childhood. Sometimes we search for meaning and those kinds of things in life as relationships are broken through death and through those kinds of events in our lives. It's interesting to see what's happening there. Nowadays, many people are still wanting to have gatherings, wanting to do something meaningful, but the traditional rituals that are sometimes associated with funerals is changing somewhat in the world.
What do you see as the biggest difference between managing a cemetery and mortuary and when you're actually there to help bury someone?
Well, with any management responsibility, John, there are administrative things to take care of. There are day-to-day responsibilities that I have. As I speak at funerals or I'm engaged with families as they go through that process, it's a stark reminder that it, in every sense of the word, is a people business in a very unique and real way. And actually, I've found that there's great compatibility between what I do at work and the efforts that we have at work to make difficult things a little easier, and my religious involvement as well.
How would you say you came to religion?
Well, like many, I was born into it in a real way. My parents were members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. They raised me in that faith, but I think all of us have to come to the realization that a religious order, a faith tradition is right for us or it isn't. In my experience, that realization came to me very, very early on. I remember as a little boy attending General Conference. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the LDS Church, the Mormon Church, is centered, it's headquartered in Salt Lake City, and we're familiar with the Mormon Tabernacle Choir that is aired, thankfully, on this station as well, and we appreciate that. As a little boy, I attended General Conference, and I remember as a little boy standing with my parents as that magnificent choir sang. And I felt something. It was more than just beautiful music. There was something that stirred inside of me, a realization that I really do have a Heavenly Father, that there's a purpose to all of this, and that we're not alone in the universe, and that I could trust my Heavenly Father. That feeling's never left me.
I read the other day that a man said you could call him a Mormon boy all of his life and he wouldn't be offended by that, but there's no such thing as the Mormon Church. Can you address that a little?
That's interesting, John. You know, any organization can only be as strong as its individual members, and we try to work on that all of the time to make sure that our faith and our walk matches our talk, to make sure that we're striving to be as individuals the best we can be, to live our religion 24 hours a day, 7 days a week as best we can. There's a lot of misunderstanding with the Mormon Church as an institution. We try to do our best to dispel some of those things, some of those rumors and misconceptions. I think one of the best ways we can do that is to just get out and to be with those not of our faith, work with them, let them see our sincerity and our desire to make the world a better place.
How did you come to be where you are in the LDS Church?
In our church, the opportunities for growth and leadership start very, very, very young. We give our first talks at the pulpit in primary. I can remember my very first talk. I was probably about 7 or 8 years old. I gave a talk on Abraham Lincoln in what we call primary, which is a worship service portion of our Sunday meetings for children. And I was nervous, and I got up there. My folks helped me. But that pattern starts very, very early on. We begin at that age. We believe in serving, experiencing. We don't have a paid ministry. So our sermons, our instruction is given by lay members of the church. And that's an interesting thing. It causes us all to kind of pick up a paddle and paddle together, work together. But it also does some wonderful things in building confidence and trust and the capacity to grow beyond ourselves and to do what we might not otherwise feel we're capable of. So it started early on in my life.
That leads to having heard and seen quite a bit about the humanitarian effort of the LDS Church. I recently read a thing where Catholic Charities and the LDS Church had combined to dig wells and things in Africa. Can you comment a little bit on humanitarian?
That's a wonderful, wonderful part of what our church is actively engaged in. And we believe that it's a core principle in what we hold on to as the gospel of Jesus Christ. We believe, as we study the New Testament, that Jesus went about doing good to try to help those in need. And we try to do that. And we do that globally, and we also do it right here at home. I'm grateful for my association with those in the Catholic faith. One of the things that we did in conjunction with the Interfaith Service Bureau in terms of humanitarian effort was to combine with the Catholic Church in helping with food for the homeless. There's a Cathedral Square homeless program, and we started joining with them, and we do it still on a quarterly basis, where members of the congregations in our area here in Sacramento gather food together, and we put lunches together, and those are delivered down to the cathedral for distribution to the homeless, and it's a wonderful opportunity. So yes, we firmly subscribe to helping one another inside and outside of the church. Wherever need is present, we try to do whatever we can to provide our resources to help.
Now, the LDS unit over which you preside is involved with the Homeless Easter Project.
We are.
Can you tell us about that?
We are. Just to help folks understand the way the church is organized, our church, as I mentioned earlier, headquartered in Salt Lake City. We have a prophet, we have a presiding council in Salt Lake City that oversees the work in the world, 12 apostles, just like the church in Jesus' day that we learn about in the New Testament, but then we're divided into local congregations and units. Here in Sacramento, I have responsibility for 8 congregations here in the Sacramento and Rancho Cordova area. I also am involved, and I'm grateful to be involved with you, John, in the Interfaith Council of Greater Sacramento. I heard about the Easter distribution program for the homeless at Loaves and Fishes. We were asked and approached whether or not the LDS Church could provide 500 sleeping bags as a part of that effort. I thought about that, and that seemed like a tall order. But then we thought there are many, many congregations in the Sacramento area. there are some 35, close to 40,000 members of the church in the greater Sacramento area. That's very doable. But then something wonderful happened. I came back to my own individual congregations and those who work with me. And they said, we can do this ourselves. We can do this with our congregations right within our little Sacramento, Cordova area. And John, I've been amazed at the response. We've had individuals that have gone to their friends, their neighbors, within their congregations, they've talked about it. And the generosity has just flourished. I spoke to some of my colleagues at East Lawn and opened it up to my coworkers. They have begun to bring sleeping bags and to distribute those for the Easter program as well. In fact, I was in my office. The receptionist where I work, wonderful young woman, rode up to my office on her bicycle, and she had 2 child's sleeping bags on her bike, and she took them off, gave them to me, and she said, my daughter wants to contribute to this effort too. There's something infectious for good that happens when we work together for something that is needed. And we try to do that in our church. We try to teach it, and it's a wonderful privilege to be able to work with our brothers and sisters of all faith to help people.
Let's talk interfaith for just a minute. It seems to me that 30 or 40 years ago, when I was a young adult, the churches were sort of every man for himself. They were taking care of themselves. In the last 10 or 15 years, we have a real strong gathering of the faiths where they want to help each other,
right,
no matter what their faith might be. And there are councils being held and conferences and conventions. Can you comment on that?
Absolutely. I think, and over the years, historically, our church was kind of looked at as an organization that takes care of its own, but not much else. And we think of our pioneer history where our wagons were kind of circled and facing inward, and we kind of just stayed, not standoffish so much, but we kind of just took care of our own. We've tried to change kind of that perspective in the world. We've opened up our wagons. We've begun to be involved more and more in community efforts wherever the church is found, which is all over the world. And I know that here in Sacramento, our church became involved in what was then the Interfaith Service Bureau and took an active role then. And it was a wonderful thing for us to discover that we share an awful lot. Sure, there are differences in doctrine, there are differences in belief, in manners of worshiping, but there's a whole lot that we share. And the exciting thing for me as I've begun over the past 5 or 10 years to become involved is I've developed some really, really strong, abiding friendships. That's what it's about. And I think as we can do more and more of that, communities will not only embrace it, but they'll be benefited by it. So we've seen a lot of wonderful things that have happened as we've opened up first dialogue and then gotten shoulder to shoulder to actually go to work. It's been a wonderful thing to watch.
Makes a huge difference when you're friends.
You bet it does.
Now, you spoke about the wagon trains and the pioneers. Most people, when they hear the term Mormon, would think of either Joseph Smith or Brigham Young.
Right.
Can you talk a little bit about those 2 men?
Sure.